What you guys, got another video here for you. Used office PCs in 2026. Hidden gems or total junk. That's what we're going to be taking a look at today. This is an updated video on some of the videos I've made in the past about this topic, and I wanted to touch on a few things here just to keep it fresh for 2026, just so people don't fall into the same trap as a lot of other people have when they've bought these old office PCs. Now, some of these old office PCs might be tempting considering the state of the component market right now, which is RAM prices are really high. So something like this, which is £120 for HP Pro Desktop 400 G5 SFF, Core i5 8500, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabytes of NVMe storage. So for general computer use, this is probably going to be fine. For surfing the web, looking at YouTube videos and doing emails, it's going to be fine. You can even install Windows 11 on it, and you can even use Linux on it. So that's what it's good for. If it's for gaming, you're going to have to upgrade some parts. For instance, the power supply needs to be changed. You may also need to put in another drive for storage for all your games, and you might want a bigger, larger NVMe drive. Some of these only come with 8 gigabytes of RAM, so you might need to add more RAM. And that's where the cost comes in. And when you factor all those parts in, it becomes quite an expensive computer for what it actually is. So these are the things you need to look out for. It does have proprietary parts. The upgrade path is not there for this particular build. And the processor is nearly 9 years old. So the i5 8500 is a 6-core and 6-thread processor. It was released on the second quarter of 2018. And also they did an i7 version of this as well, which is still a 6-core processor but with 12 threads, and this was also released, I think, on the fourth quarter of 2017. So by today's standards, that's getting pretty old, and there's going to be a point where it's going to have high utilization, and especially when you drop in a brand new graphics card into the equation, it's going to cause a lot of micro stuttering, bottlenecks when playing games if you're looking to use this as a gaming system. Just for normal desktop use, it's going to be fine. This one right here, £79, is also another one that might be tempting. This only has 8 gigabytes of RAM, which means it's only got one stick, and it will need to be upgraded. Also, it only has 256 gigabytes of SSD storage, which means you're going to have to upgrade that as well. And the power supply would have to be upgraded, and you would have to buy a graphics card. A thing to look out for is damage on these things. They've been sitting around under a desk, being kicked, being scratched, and they can be quite damaged, some of these. So that is the reason why they sometimes are quite cheap. Sometimes the seller will grade these from A to D, A being the best and D being the worst, and you have to read the description because some of these can have dents and scratches on them. And sometimes the images are just for display purposes only, and they are not the actual version you're going to actually receive. But if you're looking to have this on show and make it look really nice, you need to be pretty picky on the ones that you're purchasing. And this is what we call a small form factor PC. Now, there's even smaller ones than those, so be careful which ones you choose. Now, if you're looking for a tower office PC or desktop PC like this, then these are more appealing. But you can see this has i5 8500, 6 cores, 8 gigabytes of RAM, DDR4, and 256 gigs of M.2 storage. Now, many of these systems are proprietary. That means the proprietary motherboard form factor. Many of these OptiPlex motherboards are not even ATX, micro ATX, or even ITX compliant. Mounting holes, sizes, and layouts are often custom to Dell, HP, and Lenovo, and many others. They won't fit your standard PC case without modifications, drilling holes, adapters, etc. So case swaps are difficult, but not impossible, and sometimes impractical. Limited upgrade paths as well. Let's quickly talk about the power supply. These are proprietary as well, often with custom connections on them. Obviously on the board you'll see there we've got custom cables with custom connections and custom pinouts for those as well. So you need adapter cables for all this to work. Some of the power supplies are not your standard ATX power supplies. They don't have 24-pin ATX connectors on them, which also causes problems for people. They have certain standard PSUs that have to be used in Dell systems. They are different shapes and sizes. They're not your standard size. So finding replacements with higher wattage on them are not easy to find and can be quite expensive, and you might have to mod the case to get them to fit. The power supplies in these sometimes have no GPU connectors on them, which means you can't put a beefy graphics card in here. You have to use some sort of janky setup to try and get it to work. And this then becomes a fire risk because these power supplies are just not powerful enough to drive a much more powerful GPU in here. Sometimes you have to mod the case to even get the GPU to fit inside here because there's not much room for modern day GPUs in these particular builds. And we talked about the custom pin layouts that Dell uses. Sometimes the plug will fit inside there, but it won't actually work, and it can cause risk of damaging the actual board itself if you plug in the wrong cable with the wrong pin layout. So also another thing to remember is the actual power supply itself has very low wattage. It's not a lot of power to deliver the card, and even if you could get the card in there, you might need to use a Dremel to cut out the case to get the card to fit in, because there's not a lot of headroom there for the card to fit. There's very few fan headers on the board. There's not a lot of airflow inside these cases, which means you get a lot of heat problems. Also, you'll notice right there as well that there is a funny shape to the motherboard. That's because the proprietary front panel connector is molded to the board. This means that the power button, the USB, and also other ports might not work on the front panel if you do a case swap. And where the problems start to rise are the power supply. You can see 260 watts. It's not enough to run a modern day GPU. Yes, it will boot up and it will probably play some games, and eventually it will get really hot and it will run the risk of frying the whole computer and probably catching fire. Purchasing brand new cards for the low profile systems are quite expensive. So if you're looking to buy a brand new card, you're looking at something like this, £278.99. It will play all your games you need. If you want a decent graphics card for the desktop versions, you'll see it's going to cost £407.94. It's a short base card, but it does require a minimum system power of 500 watts, which means you will have to replace the power supply on desktop versions of these Dell OptiPlexes or HPs or Lenovos, and you would also have to replace the power supply on these low profile, small form factor systems as well. As we've already mentioned, limited GPU upgrade support, so stock PSUs have low wattage and no PCI Express power connectors on them. I've seen people showing how to use Molex and SATA power to power the GPU, which is never a good thing. Also, 550 watts on these low profile GPUs is quite a lot, so that power supply is not going to cut it. So look at the cost, £135 here. You're going to have to upgrade the memory, which is not cheap right now. You're going to need to upgrade the drive inside here, which is not cheap as well right now. And you're going to have to upgrade the power supply inside here as well, which is also not cheap. And then you're going to have to source yourself a graphics card to put inside here. Another problem you're going to find with these is the cooling and airflow constraints. They also have custom heat sinks and fan headers on these, non-standard fan controllers, and also there's not a lot of fan headers on the board if you want to add more fans in to try and keep the system cool, especially when gaming. Look for ones that do have an M.2 slot on them. These are more desirable rather than using old mechanical hard drives. And this picture shows it all right here. Look at that, 64% utilization. This is the sort of thing you're going to see with these old systems when you're running Windows 11 on them. And this is what causes input lag, stuttering, bottlenecks, or freezing when you're playing games because the CPU can't keep up with modern day GPUs. High refresh rate monitors just can't keep up, and it's just old. And this is the problem you're going to have. And this is when people start trying to debloat the system and try to lower the utilization on these old systems because they just can't cope with modern day tasks. And even if you dropped in a 1070 Ti and played some 1080p gaming, you're still going to get some micro stuttering and high CPU usage and bottlenecks on these systems. But 1080p gaming is where these systems are at. Another big problem with these systems is the BIOS firmware restrictions. Locked or limited BIOS in many models, whether it be Dell, HP, Lenovo and many others. Limited control over your RAM timings, CPU options and things like that. Upgrade paths for CPU are pretty much non-existent because the BIOSes are locked on them and you can't do anything. Case swaps on some of these are possible, but some of them are a complete nightmare because they have molded IO shields on the back of the case, which means you have to then get a Dremel to cut all these out. Power supplies are weird shapes like this one right here, where it's got a tiny little fan on here. These are all problems you're going to have to face when you're buying these particular old office, surplus office systems. Make sure if you're buying them that you don't get fooled with these ones right here. This is not compatible with Windows 11 Pro. This system is not officially supported by Microsoft for Windows 11. So if you are buying these, just understand what you're getting into. Let's take a look at your typical proprietary motherboard. You can see it's a weird shape right here. The front panel part is that weird part at the bottom of the screen. And also you can see on the board itself, there's a lot of limitations on here. We've got very few fan headers on here. There's only one for the CPU and one for the fan. And there sometimes might be another one for another fan. But you can see we only have 2 RAM slots on here. An M.2 slot, they're the ones to sort of look for now. Very few SATA ports on here as well. And we also have proprietary ATX power plugs to go into the board. This is what they're using here. Front panel, custom front panel, pin layouts on here as well. And that's what you're basically getting with these particular motherboards. Now, if you're looking for something like HP, there's also HP versions as well. So let's talk about who's going to buy these. Well, if you're on a strict budget of $300 total budget and you enjoy tinkering and modding PCs, then these might be ideal for you. If you need a reliable workstation or a server, or you just want something to mess around with to install Linux on, then these are ideal because they're cheap and you can pick them up just about anywhere because they're office surplus PCs. Avoid these if you're looking to play 2K or 4K ultra settings gaming. Avoid these if you're looking to upgrade because they're hard to upgrade. They have poor compatibility with standard parts. PSUs and motherboards are generally locked into that ecosystem. Case swaps are a complete headache with these, and you have limited gaming potential on these. I know some people might argue that case. If you're a 1080p gamer and you've got a cheap budget system, then it might work out for you. But you are going to suffer with bottlenecks, micro stuttering and freezing when you're playing games. It's just the nature of these systems. So which one should you buy? I get this question quite a lot. The ones you want to go for are the ones where you can just do minimal changes, i.e. the old Dell OptiPlexes used to be able to just plug in a power supply into it, a ATX power supply, and drop in a graphics card and you've got a decent 1080p gaming system. And Dell have got wise to that and they've changed the way they make their PCs. This is the modern day version, a 10th gen version. You see it's pretty short and stout, but on the back when you look at the power supply, it's a tiny little power supply inside there, which makes things a little bit more difficult if you're looking to upgrade this to make it a gaming system. It's doable, but it requires a bit of modding and also a power supply upgrade to be able to put in a modern day GPU in here. So if I'm going to be buying one of these, I'd make sure I'm getting at least the 10th generation processor in here. Make sure it's got at least 16 gigabytes of RAM and make sure that you're getting at least 1 terabyte of NVMe storage in here. That way you ain't got to upgrade much of what's inside. Also, make sure you find one that's easy to upgrade, that's not as difficult, where you do have to do a lot of modding to the system to get it to work. Make sure your GPU that you're going to be using will fit inside. Do your research. Make sure you've got plenty of parts that you can get. For instance, the power supply. Are they available for higher wattage for that particular model? You can check AliExpress and places like that for replacement power supplies that will fit inside that case, that will give you plenty of power, that have GPU cables on them so you can use a GPU inside there. It's important you do all this research before you pull the trigger on that PC because you don't want to end up buying a lemon, which makes it virtually impossible to upgrade to a gaming system. Make sure you can case swap them. Make sure you can do all the things that you want to do with your PC if you are purchasing it before you purchase it, because you don't want to end up with a doorstop that is limited to what you can actually do with it. As you go up to 12th generation, the price will start to skyrocket. DDR5, you can see 512 gigabytes of NVMe, i7, 12th generation, 32 gigabytes of RAM, £500. Consider looking at how much things cost, but look at the size of that power supply and look inside here. Just do a bit of research first. Remember, there's mini PCs, ultra small form factor, desktop PCs. The ultra small form factors are quite difficult to fit a GPU in there. There's not a lot of airflow and you will run into issues. And there's people selling ultra small form factors as small form factor, and they're not the same. They are much smaller and much more compact. So make sure you don't fall for that trick that a lot of people are selling on eBay. Try and steer clear of some of the gaming systems that are being sold on eBay and Amazon as gaming systems, and all they are is motherboards ripped out of Dell OptiPlexes and stuck into a cheap RGB gaming case and sold as a gaming system for £300 or something like that. Do not buy those. You're going to end up regretting it because there's no upgrade path. Hopefully this information will help you decide on what to buy and what not to buy. And my name has been Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. If you've got any questions, always pop on our Discord server. I'll do my best to answer all your questions over there. Hope you're having a lovely day, and I shall catch you in the very next video. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.